Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. I have with me Major Madhan Kumar, and he's going to give us an update on the fast-moving developments in both Sri Lanka and Pakistan. For those who may have not heard, the entire cabinet of the Sri Lankan government has just submitted its resignation, and we are also seeing that some of the Rajapaksa family people are not happy with the social media restrictions being put in place. So let's get a latest update from Major Madan Kumar. Namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskaram, sir. Thank you so much, Jain.
Jai Hind to you. And what is happening in Sri Lanka, Major? And then we will talk about Pakistan.
Sri Lanka has been things has been very pretty fast. It's been deteriorating now, in the sense they have gone for a complete curfew. They've invoked
Emergency, right?
emergency, and then subsequently yesterday they blacked out their social media, all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, so and so. And but that today is a world of VPN, so all the Lankans have used VPN, and they've been continuously tweeting. They're on social media. They're sharing their anguish. So that's been going on for quite some time now. And yesterday evening, it was said that Mahinda Rajapaksa, the Prime Minister, has offered his resignation. But immediately the party spokesperson came on board and said, no, that's wrong news. And by yesterday night, we get to hear that the entire cabinet of the Rajapaksa's government has resigned. The question is, the resignation is fine. The president, Gotabaya, has to acknowledge and agree for the resignation. That hasn't been done till now. So they want to move for a caretaker government, interim government, we would say, which would all likely comprise their with their opposition parties. But people are in no mood to take this. The protest has been on streets. There's been 10 to 12 hours of power cut a day. There is literally they're running out of fuel, essential food supplies, cooking gases, and literally it's the country has come to a standstill now. How far and how long this can sustain is a question. In the interim, India has helped them with around 40,000 metric tons of diesel and food products and essential medicines. But that's going to fix the gap for maybe in another few days, considering the size of the country, 2.2 million people. It's going to 22 million people. It's going to take it's going to take a lot of time for them to recover from this. So they are speaking about an IMF bailout. So what is politically happening is the ruling party, which is headed by the brothers, Kotabaya, the president, and Mahinda Rajapaksa, the prime minister, have been putting the blame on the price rise. If you see the sequence of events, initially when it started 5 6 months before, they said it's the traders who are holding the food products, imported food products, and they appointed, I think, a brigadier or a major general who was in their army, who went on and raided all the godowns of these importers who import food products and further deliver it to their citizens. Now, when that happened, the blame was on the traders, the greediness of the traders, and so and so. But that didn't last for long. Even after the raids and all these things are happening, when the government literally took over the control of essential distribution of this commodities, then after the situation didn't turn. And then later on, it further got deteriorated. They said, grow your own food. That was the second thing. Yes, we have a shortage of food. We agree to it. Now the traders are not the culprits. Yes, we have a genuine shortage of food. We don't have that much of forex. So please grow your own food. I mean, growing own food is it's for a city like Colombo, it's not possible. Outside in the villages, it's fine. But how much of vegetables can you grow? Can you grow your pulses and cereals? It's not possible. So that was going on for some time. And later, there was an emotional speech by the President Kotabaya, who went on record and said, I take complete responsibility of what has happened. This should not have happened. Don't worry, we will stay strong, and we are in touch with countries like India, Japan, China, and we are also speaking to IMF. We'll soon get a bailout and things will be normal. Now is a situation where the political leadership is just not able to control the anger of the people. The anger of the people mean it's not the Sinhalese who majoritively, I think 90% plus Sinhalese voted for Rajapaksa. So it is not about the Sinhalese population. It is Sinhalese, it's Tamils, and it's also the Muslims. So all the three major communities there, they all have gone on streets. They all have gone on protest. They have been fighting against the government. So they very frequently you get to see hear a word called hora hora. Hora is nothing but thief. So they're calling the president as thief. Now, strategically, they want to do a tactical move. One of the Rajapaksas has to be the scapegoat. One
Take the
has to
fall.
finish.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it is either Kotabaya or Mahinda Rajapaksa. In this sense, Mahinda Rajapaksa offering his resignation. He is the mass leader. Kotabaya is more a guy who's come from a strategic background, who was in defense earlier. So they want to sacrifice possibly Mahinda, who would in turn put the blame that this is not has happened because of us in the last 2 years. Because since 2004, the rule has been mismanaged. People went on loan spree, reckless spending on infra projects, which is not going to yield any short-term returns. So we are going to kind of sacrifice this, will face the elections. Nevertheless, they want to lose this election, but they want to keep the relevance. That's a political move they're doing. But beyond this, I don't think so. People are going to agree any sort of the Sinhalese pride or the influence of Buddhist monks. Yesterday, I happened to see one of a Buddhist monk, very, very influential Buddhist monk who's based out of Colombo. Now he says that he's kind of given up on this thing. So even the Buddhist monk, which is a very, very powerful art, they are distancing themselves from the current government. So that's the kind of scenario which is happening now. Luckily, they haven't had a bloodshed yet. All these protests are leading into injuries. People are getting injured, they're getting arrested, and they're getting released. But there have not been any fatal incidences. For God forbid, if something of that sort happens, this is going to flare out into its next worst level. Surprisingly, none of the Sri Lankan media, which has been totally controlled by the Rajapaksa's family, none of the Sri Lankan media and Indian media also showed the protest which is happening in North, especially in Jaffna, Yalpanam. Thousands of students, scores and scores of students are protesting outside the universities. They've hoisted black flag in the respective houses. They have been protesting democratically, but the anger is and the sentiments of people is very, very, very high. And I don't know how long this government is going to survive in the current format.
Major Madhan Kumar, their main industry is tourism and, of course, exports of some goods like tea and so on and so forth. Has tourism returned to Sri Lanka?
So tourism cannot recover at this point of time. If you see, the people have just started traveling, and almost all the countries have faced a very, very tight situation economically, emotionally, financially in their respective lives. Uh, Now, if you see, look at the tourist population, especially tourism is one of the main industry of Lanka. But if you see if you delve into the next level of tourism, into the details of it, it's mostly the Russian and the Ukrainian tourists who come there.
I
Almost
see.
50% of them.
I see. I see.
So the Russians and the Ukrainians, they to avoid the peak winters, they come here. They spend some time, 3 to 4 months. They come to Goa. They come to Thailand, and the Sri Lanka is supposedly a slightly premium tourist destination for Russians and Ukrainians. Now, unfortunately, both the countries are in war now, so there is no way they're going to see these tourists in the near future. They also have scores of Chinese tourists coming in. That has also been considerably stopped. A couple of my friends in Sri Lanka, they said they always welcome their order of priority in terms of tourists coming in is basically the Russians and Ukrainians and the Eastern Europeans, followed by Indians and then by Chinese, because Chinese are they do a tight packed bootstrapped tour. They don't tip, they don't spend that much. So it's a very, very and that doesn't get that much of revenue vis-a-vis a European or a Russian tourist. So that is not going to happen in near future. And even if they have their infrastructure ready, like tourism industry, any hotel, you see the fixed cost, the total operating cost versus the fixed cost is very, very high. So we cannot expect a tourism bounce back or a recovery or a very mild recovery in tourism, at least for next year or so.
So from what I am understanding, the Sri Lankan economy, it is a net food importer. And for importing food, you need foreign exchange. And for needing foreign exchange, you need tourism. So therefore, printing notes is not going to help Sri Lanka solve this problem. Am I reading it right?
Definitely, sir. They have done more harm to their economy by printing more currencies, which has led into a huge retail inflation. As we speak, the inflation, if I correctly remember, it's around 21% retail inflation now. And that's going to make people bleed. It's like, the Indonesia prints
It hurts
currency.
everyone. Correct.
Yeah, it helps everyone. So they have printed currencies. That's not going to help them unless or until you have a gold reserve where the central bank can come and influence or interfere in the economy. That's not going to happen. Their forex reserves are almost nil now. They don't have any money. They don't have any gold reserve. So three things which drives their economy. Number one is tourism. Number two is the textile exports to Europe, and third is the exports of spices, tea,
Tea and so on.
and so on, so the allied products. So three things. The first one, tourism, was messed up by COVID. No government can do much about it. They should have diversified the tourism, maybe something like a medical tourism or even Ayurveda. They didn't do it. So that's not. We can partly blame the government. They should have interfered, but they haven't done it. Secondly, on the textiles, in the textiles, what happened is they have a tax ops with Europe. So chunk of textile exports from India went into Sri Lanka because of the tax difference which Europe offered. Now that was stopped for a brief period of time. Why? Because of the war crimes they have done in 2009. So every time it comes up in the UN Council and the International Court of Justice and the resolutions comes in, Britain always votes against Sri Lanka. The Europe is in favor of the Tamil there, so who have a very very solid diaspora in Europe. So that also suffered, and they couldn't do it. And the last nail which they axed themselves by none other than Mahinda Rajapaksa was he gave a very famous speech last year in UN that we are the first country who are going to go completely organic, and we are going to have a sustained agriculture. We are not going to use fertilizers. We are not going to use pesticides. Learn from us. Now, after he went back, he had put a ban on import of chemical fertilizers, basically urea and DAP, and he also banned import of the pesticides, the key pesticides. By then, the reap was already there. The transition of from non-organic to organic, it takes around 3 to 5 years by any standards. So what he thought was that we will premiumize this. I'll make the complete country organic, and then I'll demand a premium in the European and the US markets. But that takes a lot of time to implement it. They didn't read it right. So they did it and they messed up their entire agricultural output. So the agricultural export also came down, especially the spices and condiments. And because the population is stable, they're going to import rice, wheat, and predominantly rice and cereals, pulses and cereals. So that has effectively put them into a place where they are now. Another thing, if you see wherever they've been taking loans, it is all crazy infrastructure projects. Like look at port cities. It's like you reclaim the sea, then the Chinese investments are there. They build castles. They want that to be a Dubai 2.0 in the Indian Ocean region. But if you look at the Dubai is still not filled. It still has some more potential to accommodate trade and industries. Now they have a second city, sister city coming up with a lot of infrastructure. They have the money to, Emirates have money to build it. Now, if you look at Singapore, they are also coming up with the second version of their port city. Malaysia is also building up the forest city, the very, very famous forest city where you run a corporate office in the middle of a forest with a kind of ecosystem and so. But the demand side is less. Hardly any country is posting a double-digit GDP anywhere in the last couple of years. Now, where is the demand? Who will come and establish those offices? Who is going to disinvest from some other market, come and put it in the Sri Lankan market? So everything which they have done in terms of the fancy infrastructure was more focused on south and parts of west. What they've ignored completely is north and east, which is the place where they would have actually seen the real growth in terms of agriculture and allied industries, in fishing, marine, and so on. So there they have completely messed it up because out there they saw that as a Tamil area, the mindset is still not changed. They haven't come to a place where they could say that this is a government of Sri Lanka, which is includes the Tamil Eelams, the Muslims, and the Sinhalese. They have completely dominated that area. That area was cut off. There is hardly any development there. Uh, Most of the temples, this close down to 7,000 odd temples, which is there, has been completely ruined. And most of the places where they didn't want people to access or they want to stall the infrastructure, they call it as a military area. So it comes into a protected area where normal civilians cannot enter. So they are coupled with all these factors, they are paying a price right now.
Major Madan, India is giving some money, I think 1 billion credit or something of that nature. Can India help in terms of giving them good food, like for example, rice, wheat, and even I think we are giving petroleum and diesel and so on and so forth? Is a kind of aid better? Because why I say that is then India can direct it in areas where it feels that there perhaps was a shortfall. That is what you mentioned right now, like north and the east. India can say, look, we will send it by ship and we will send it to all these different ports. And if there is a way we can even help in distributing it to every house, like the way India did it in COVID time. It can be done that way, because what happens is there is no perception that somebody is being chosen as a favorite over somebody is being favored over somebody else.
Yes, sir, absolutely. The problem is with the last mile connectivity. When
Yes.
a country like India helps them,
Right.
majorly it goes to the Colombo port. The ship gets docked. Like yesterday, a ship with 40,000 metric ton of diesel and food products like they are predominantly rice eaters. It's around 80% plus population is on rice. So we have been giving them good quality wheat and very reasonable rice and the basic pulses and cereals, the proteins and the carbohydrate basically. But what is happening is the distribution, the public distribution system, the PDS, effectively lies with the state government, with the Sri Lankan government there. And all the areas in north and east, the provinces where Tamils live sizably, they have been managed by their provincial governors. Now that's where the thing comes in. The allotment. Even when we see India, we saw the politics. What happened in during the COVID vaccination?
Oh yes.
So people
Lanka
made
is famous for that.
yeah, one state is getting more, and Tamil Nadu is getting less, and Kerala is getting more, and vice versa. You know, all this politics is going on. Similarly, that is happening currently. But what is also happening is one of their opposition MP, I'm forgetting his name, he went on record yesterday. He said India is giving all this with a very shrewd intention. This is the words he has used. India is giving us all this, but with a very hidden. With it's not transparent. It's hidden. Why? Because this credit line has been extended only for a year, and India very much knows that Sri Lanka cannot pay back in a year, and once they default, then India is going to drive its agenda. Now that's another perception which has been done by them. This is predominantly done by those MPs and the political outfits which are basically Chinese aligned and Chinese oriented. Now China has done nothing. There's no news about China. There's no aid from China. A much bigger economy than India, 5 times bigger. They are not done anything. But they have been instigating the protests. They have been instigating their MPs. Like when a country comes and helps you, gives you some credit line, it's always given. Credit lines are always given for a year. After a year, it's an interest-free one. It's a credit. So I give you rice and this thing. So it's on credit. You need to pay me back after a year. If you are not able to pay back for whatsoever reasons, then the concerned country extends it for a period of 6 months or 1 year or so and so. Now, this is the perception which they are trying to build, but unfortunately, people are not trying to take it. One of my very close friend who works at the textile industry, he was there in Sri Lanka 2 days before was there for 15 days. I could go on record and say that, we have realized what real democracy means. We are proud and we are happy about the way your government has been functioning, especially your prime minister. You please take the entire Rajapaksa family with you and you give us some good leaders. Quote unquote, this I can get the person on board and make him quote this because he has been in Sri Lanka. He often visits there for his business reasons. So that's the kind of sentiments which they have seen. And even in social media, all the Lankans, be it Sinhalese or be it anybody, they are clearly seeing that this is where the thing is has gone wrong. Our leaders are clueless. They are thieves. They just focused on their own family. Five Rajapaksas are in the cabinet now, and the extended family is there everywhere. Now, banning internet or social media in this era where you really don't have any control in terms or have systems like China or India. So everybody started using VPN. The literacy rate is quite high. Sri Lankans are well learned. So they've been started using VPN. So that's not the way
Doesn't help.
it has to be done. It's you're adding more fuel to the fire. And none of these leaders till date have come at least on TV to assure their citizens. Even if you see Pakistan, at least Imran Khan, whatever reasons he may be a bad leader, whatever it may be, but he has always he has come on TV and there's a new communication which is happening between the people and the government. Out here, it is complete silence, and they're still waiting, and they're talking about IMF bailout. IMF bailout is going to take a lot of time. They also agree that this bilateral loans it's like an oxygen, it's like a ventilator, can keep us going for some time. But the permanent solution is going to be a IMF bailout. So they are kind of now started advertising about the IMF bailout. Once we have the IMF bailout, don't worry, all will be good. But the fact is, if you look at the history, when all these major countries were gone for a bailout from IMF is not giving anything free. Point number one. IMF will direct your government. In a way, they are going to rule you.
Correct.
They will decide what prices you have to pay. They are not going to allow any subsidies. They are going to make you pay high taxes. End of the day, the 2.2 crore population of Sri Lanka has to pay back in cash or by taxes, by direct or indirect taxes to the IMF, and with a good amount of interest. It's not free. People think that IMF is something like a World Bank. All countries pool in some money and then they kind of bail out a family member who's suffering. That doesn't work that way. Every single penny will be taken back. The IMF has good set of the so-called economists. They will decide on taxation. They will decide on absolutely there will be zero subsidy. Advanced tax collection, right? They have a very, very stringent measure of monitoring it. It is just simply instead of a government paying out this loan, it is the loan amount divided by the population, or the population in the numerator divided by the loan amount. Every citizen has to pay. Now, this clearly tells us the few governments in India which are like they're kind of freebies. I'll give this free, I'll give that free. We need to understand, like, look at Punjab today, their GSDP versus their loans. It's almost crossed 50%. You have already taken a loan of 3 crore INR for more than what you can actually do. Your entire budget, it's almost 58% of it. If this continues and if you don't curtail it, if we assume one of the state, for an example, to be a country, to be an independent country, they are in the same state what Lanka is now. It is because that we are a larger country, we are united. Somewhere it is getting balanced. I think it's now a wake-up call for all of us to actually see this, that we need to face the reality. If the crude prices are going up, we need to pay the extra fuel cost. And beyond a point, social security is fine. Free food grains is fine. But beyond a point, if we keep offering freebies and make free distribution of money, be it gold loan waiver or anything, that is going to take us to the place where Sri Lanka is now.
Okay, so I think one of the things I have found is I have tasted tea from many countries, Ceylon tea, that was the name of the brand. I used to have that. I mean, the last cup I had was probably 30 years old. I still remember it. It lingers in my mouth. They have a very premium quality tea. I don't know if that's the same thing that is now marketed under Dilma, but it's a very, very good tea. And I'm just trying to see if there is a way, India is probably one of the largest nations to drink tea. And, there's a premium brand that they can probably try and find a niche in India. At the same time, some things have to be worked out. So let's hope for the best. Major Madan, we have to cover what is happening in Pakistan, your view, and then we will take maybe 5 questions tops. Sorry, viewers, you've got a lot of good questions, but we need to limit the time of this program to a certain period. So we will try and do our best to add more questions. Major Madan, Pakistan.
I still remember a very famous tweet by our elite citizen Robert Vadra, I think way back in 2012, where he said it's Banana Republic. Possibly used it for a wrong country like India. That's what exactly has been happening in Pakistan now. Through your channel, I think channels, we need to tell the Pakistani people what is happening exactly. The hate of Indians and the love for Kashmir. These 2 things alone will not take your country anywhere. So I'll tell you where this has gone wrong. Now we know the history of Pakistan. No Pakistani prime minister has ever completed his full term. Either is dismissed, or either he goes on exile, or third he is killed or assassinated.
Yes, assassinated. Right.
In place, and every time this keeps happening. Right from Muhammad Ali Jinnah, when he was the founding father of Pakistan, when he took over as Governor General, and somebody else became the Prime Minister in 1951. So where does the power lies? Now the power at those times lied with the Governor General, obviously because Jinnah wanted to have this. But Jinnah also was smart enough to understand that he is the governor, somebody else will run the government. And for whatever reason, there were food shortages, and they had a setback in 47 war, and subsequently they were bleeding. They were not growing at a pace which has to grow, but later they picked up and they were much faster than India. That's history. So the power center was one with the Governor General. Later on, the Governor General became the president. Then there is a prime minister. Then there is an army. We don't even call armed forces. It's primarily the army. Now there are 3 power centers. And this 3, the weakest one is the prime minister. It was always the weakest one is the prime minister. And we have the president. In later 80s, the president also got weakened. And army stood as the most powerful body in political history of Pakistan. Then within army, when this so-called war on terror started by US, and a lot of army, the ISA in fact was a brainchild of CIA. When these guys had an alignment with US and its armed forces especially, so they had developed an American way of thinking. The generals out there, they think like Americans. So these guys further had one more power center, which is ISI. So there's a power center within the power. So there was competition which was going on, and this has been going on as a history. Now today we had one guy who was a former cricketer who became the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So his election campaign was all about Naya Pakistan. All these families, whether Nawaz Sharif's family or Bilawal Bhutto family, everybody is corrupt. And there's one guy called Diesel. So there's a third leader who's called as Diesel because he takes 10% cut on everything. So there's a 10%. So he called them Chuas, the rats. So the 3 rats have spoiled the country. I am here. I am the Messiah. I will now give the Naya Pakistan. Now Naya Pakistan was built on 2 things. One is the Islamic ideology, or basically the Islamic pride. We are an Islamic nation. You can clearly see him repeatedly pronouncing certain Islamic words wherever he addresses. Even if he addresses in US or in any forum, he will always do that. So that's the brand which he wanted to build in. But one thing, he was an appointed PM by the army. And who helped him to win the elections? Everybody knows. General Nadeem was his previous ISI chief was the one who helped him win the elections. So this was going on for 3 years. And suddenly the appointed PM became a rebel. If you recollect, sir, last time when we spoke about the ISI chief's appointment, he said you have to give me choices as a prime minister of the country, chief executive. I am the person who's going to choose. But that doesn't work in Pakistan that way. Finally, General Nadeem came as an ISI chief, and that's where the friction started. So Pakistan's deep state, the army and ISI thought, no, it's time to replace this guy. So all those protests, which was controlled by means of judiciary, by means of ISIs, by means of their ISI gundas whom they directly employed to threaten these politicians and all. So that got stopped, and the political thing got started brewing. So there are a couple of rallies in Islamabad, march to Islamabad, seize it. All these things were happening, and mostly it was funded by ISI. There were videos where openly the Pakistani forces were giving money to the protesters, and they were marching into the thing. So it got started heating up. When this started heating up, finally, there is a situation where Imran Khan lands up in Russia, the day one of the war. I remember it's 26th of February.
Right.
Here to create history and so and so. Now that really, really irritated Americans. That really irked Americans, and there was no explanation. Why was he there? He actually played into this big game, and with all those fancy dialogues which he said. When he came back, by then the US was very, very clear. Now this guy is not going to stay. Army, irrespective of they played a double role, sometimes with the forces, sometimes with going against the American forces by giving intelligence to the Taliban. So said and done, they have been groomed, and they have slowly moved out from the British way of thinking to the American way of thinking. That happened way back in 1970s, and that's how this is the third generation of officers whom we see in Pakistani army. Now, they really never wanted to mess around with America at this point of time, because these guys are also going out for a IMF bailout. IMF directly works under US directions. We all know. And China on the other side has limited their investments. 26 projects of CPEC has been put on hold. Many of them have been terminated. So there's no much of money coming from China as well. Chinese are very, very smart and shrewd businessmen. They're not going to offer any free money. At this juncture, now there are three things which has happened. He goes to the parliament. Now, before entering the parliament, when the no confidence motion was presented, 140 was his support effectively, and 200 was the opposition. It clearly says that he loses the no confidence motion. All the MPs vote for a new prime minister, and all likely Mariam was supposed to be the prime minister of Pakistan. When all these things happened, he kept on saying that I'm going to play till the last ball. All these rats have spoiled the country. It is me who have taken the country forward. I am not corrupt. I live on Islamic principles. We are an Islamic nation. We have to be great again. Lot of references came about India. Look at Hindustan. They have progressed. We were way, way ahead of them in 1970s. Now they have overtaken us. The country which was split, which was into shambles, Bangladesh has also overtaken us. So it's basically he's trying to invoke nationalism. He's trying to invoke religion. And he's trying to say that I am uncorrupt. I am not corrupt. I am the only person to say. Now when this thing was presented, the speaker was missing. The deputy speaker was there. And they invoked Article 5 of their constitution, which the first one says that every Pakistani citizen has to be loyal to its nation. That's the first clause. And second thing, literally says that constitution is everything. And then there's an one more clause, I think the third one, section 6, I think, Article 6, that says that if you go against the nation, or if your loyalty is not with the nation, you can be charged for treason. Now, what he had presented is, this is what the Googly has been mentioning. And to build it up, 2 days before, he said, this is based on US. US does not want me to be here. There was a communication. I'll show you the letter. The letter was never shown. Then he retracted, and then he said foreign powers, a lot of foreign powers, and then he said US, name calling, all these things happened. It was basically to build up. What he has smartly done is, the country, he is not saying the government is under threat. Pakistan is under threat from external forces. So he tells the speaker, now Article 5 says you have to be loyal to Pakistan, which is now the government. Pakistan is under threat by the enemy forces or the foreign forces. Now, because the country is under threat, you have to show your loyalty to me, to the country which is the prime minister. Now, third one comes, because this is a very, very serious issue that the country is under foreign threat. This no confidence motion doesn't hold any value. Dismiss it. So the no confidence motion was dismissed, and then all this 200 guys who were sitting in opposition were shocked. They couldn't find anything. They were actually clueless. And then he went and announced that, yeah, I'm dissolving the cabinet, I'm dissolving the parliament, I'm recommending that to be dissolved. I sent it to the president, and now I'll face the elections. Let Awam, the people, common people, choose who's the right prime minister who can guide the future. Now this goes out, and then this is purely unconstitutional. Why? Because with whatever expertise they call it as a constitution, I'm still clueless. But with my limited knowledge, this is unconstitutional. Why? Because you can call to dissolve a government, or you can call to dissolve an assembly and even your cabinet before the no confidence motion was moved against you. Once it is moved, you have to prove yourself in the floor of the parliament, get your majority done, and then if you want, you can dissolve your government and you can face this thing. So that's where it is a constitutional violence or a violation of constitution.
Violation is coming. Right.
The Dawn, their very reputed newspaper, Dawn, has written a good article about how this entire thing has gone into a mess and how this will set up a wrong precedence in the future. Now that's one. Now comes, the ball is in the president's court. Now president immediately sends a letter. That letter is again funny. He writes it to all departments, all ministries, and all constitutional bodies, judiciary, so and so. Imran Khan will cease to exist as a prime minister of Pakistan. However, he'll be a caretaker prime minister since such time we announce an interim prime minister for the state. Now they have approached the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is here, and Supreme Court says in the night whether it is the parliament or whether it is the speaker or whether it is the president, all of you come under me. So we have the right to say what is right and what is wrong. Now the actual power center, which is the ISPR, which is the Pakistani army. Now, can you imagine a chief of army staff of a nation suddenly going on record and he says that, listen, we are good friends with America. We are very, very good friends with China. America is our biggest export market. I really don't know what they export to US. And then he also
leather goods.
And then he also says that Russia, we never had a good relation with Russia since 1970s. The relation has been always cold, and there are a couple of changes or positive changes which is happening. But however, the war on Ukraine is condemnable. The war has to immediately stop. Now the war has been going on for 3 months. It's almost a month plus now. You've been keeping mum and your prime minister goes and speaks. Now the prime minister has taken a clear anti-US stand for his political reason. And the generals are worried about their own vested interests in terms of their fancy penthouses in US and their properties in US, the children study in US. So they went on record and said, no, we are actually pro-American. We believe in America. That's our export market, blah, blah, blah. Now we are not going to mess up in the political thing. So ISPR goes on record and gives a thing in the evening, yesterday evening, that this is a political development and the army would commit to remain neutral. So we are not going to interfere. Now, why this is happening? If you look at what has happened with Parvez Musharraf and Nawaz Sharif at those point of time, so Musharraf declared himself as a president. He said the martial law has been invoked and the country is in a bad state. It's in a state of emergency. Now I am the messiah. I am the ruler of you. And then he continued for 8 years. Now General Bajwa doesn't want to do that. Why? Because the negotiations in terms of IMF bailout, in terms of loans from Emirates and other countries, packages from the Western nations, that becomes an issue when you have a military leader invoking a martial law and be the head of state of a country. They really didn't want to get into that. Number two, they are still thinking the situation is not so ripe that people will think that enough is enough with these politicians. Army, please come and take over the country. The situation is not ripe. They want the situation further to deteriorate. That's why they're keeping quiet. They said whatever president decides is fine. The opposition has gone to the Supreme Court. So it's a judicial process. Let's see. So now what will happen is, if the judiciary says this is unconstitutional, the vote of thanks should have happened, so we invoke the martial law. So then army takes over. Now army takes a very, very moral stance. See, we were apolitical. They didn't want to fall into the trap which Imran has said, that he said, look at India, their army is independent, they are obeying the government, there is no military coup there, the army is completely apolitical, they do their job. Now this is a trap set for Bajwa. Now he says, see, listen, we are not part of this political fiasco. You guys are not able to rule the country. And we are now coming into the picture. Now we are ruling the country as per the Supreme Court orders. So that's the thing which they really want to do. Otherwise, they would have taken over the government by now. Imran would have been in exile in any of the Gulf countries by now. They really don't want to do that. What Imran Khan had actually thought is, when the speaker dismisses this invoking Article 5, the opposition will go on a ruckus. They will vote against the speaker, elect a new speaker, and then pass the vote of confidence. The vote of confidence happens, and then the Imran Khan government is formally removed. But they also smartly didn't play into that, because that's also unconstitutional. You can't remove a speaker when the government is already dissolved, when the assembly is already dissolved. So it's a very, very tricky situation. It's a kind of a deadlock for them. Now this guy is building up a sympathy that, see, I have done my best. I wanted to create a Naya Pakistan. I want this Islamic State to be the number one. We were the role model for you. I don't know what all stories he said. He said the Malaysian Prime Minister then was his classmate, and he said Malaysia used to come to Pakistan and take a lot of lessons on how good is the governance is all about. And then he says UAE used to come and look at us, how good we are an Islamic state. We were the number one Islamic state. Now look at where we are now. That is because of this family rule and this 3 rats, Shua and diesel and 10% commission stories. So he wants to face the people with this sympathy that he has been removed by a foreign power. So that invokes nationalism. Second is Islam. And third is all the story about Naya Pakistan, that I am incorrect. Whereas opposition is clearly moving into this, that this guy has completely gone nuts. He doesn't, listen to the army. We had a very, very good relation with the army. He doesn't relate to the army. And in fact, he has geopoliticized the entire national security by calling out the names of Americans, so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And he has also gone bonkers in terms of praising about India and the Indian Prime Minister and so on, so. So that's a kind of thing now. Eventually, this will, if I read it right, this will eventually fall into the martial law for a brief period of time. One more elections will come down. Why General Bajwa really didn't want to move out of his current status now? Instead of me being in the direct line of fire by being the head of this country, which is in such a pathetic state economically, socially and financially, let me have a guided democracy. Let me have a puppet in place. This puppet and master system works perfectly. They have learned it from India and they have learned it with their own lessons. So now he wants to continue that. For that, he didn't want to be seen as a face like Parvez Musharraf or the previous generals the dictators who ruled Pakistan.
Yahya Khan and so on. Yeah.
This entire thing has to ripe, which means more protest, more violence. The country goes into huddle, and then finally the saviors, the messiahs, the Pakistani army will come and do a guided democracy kind of an arrangement. But they are into serious troubles as we speak. Now, because of this knee-jerk reaction of taking a very, very strong pro-American stand, they are in direct confront with two countries. Two are neighbors. One is Russia and one is Iran. And US also is not going to believe them anymore. The IMF bailout, they have called out US ambassador's name. They called out US official's name, Imran Khan. Now this will give a very, very strong hand for China to defame US, and to prove to the world, see, one country has been democratically running. Now, because of US, they have ruined the democracy. All this, faff about the democracy and we are the guardians of the world's democracy is all false. This is what Western democracy means, and this is what we have been saying for quite some time. So that's going to be the geopolitical complications for Pakistan in future.
Wow, I couldn't have found any better commentator from Pakistan to capture the way you've done, Major Madan. Hats off to you. Because I really do. I've been watching this for a while. I've been putting out short bits here and there. I've just taken some specific things, pincer-like focus. But your, total 360-degree view of where things are headed is absolutely great and spot on because it connects the dots very well. So now let's take some questions. Let's get the questions going, please. We'll try 5, and if it goes beyond 15 minutes, then we will stop there. Let's see. First question. Arun Kumar wants to know, are we expecting a wave of immigrants from Sri Lanka like the one we saw in 1981, not 71?
Yeah,
81 is when we, yeah.
So Arun, see, the two things, refugees coming from a war-torn nation is different. There is no war happening there. It is basically an economic crisis. We would expect a reasonable amount of Sri Lankan Tamils coming into India, but it's not going to be at the scale what we saw in 81.
Next question, please. Mahinda wants to know, sirs, I would like to hear both your opinions on the recent Sri Lanka nation policy regarding India, where basically they say they want to integrate systems with India.
See, they should have done it a long time before. When you have such a small nation, and especially if you're an island, the island nations across the world, if you see, they predominantly they bank on tourism, and tourism is a service industry. It can go wrong anytime. It may slow down due to recession. It may slow down due to natural calamities. It may slow down due to the things what we saw now, COVID kind of a thing. So it makes better sense for you to have an integrated system with a bigger nation, which is just next to you. Look at Nepal, look at Bhutan. Like Bhutan doesn't have a military academy. Bhutanese gets trained in India. Bhutan's national security, the border security is predominantly taken care by India. It's been done for quite some years and there's no problem. We have been safeguarding that nation. Culturally, socially, they have their own identity. Bhutan is a Hindu nation. They have their own set of laws.
I thought Bhutan was Buddhist nation.
Buddhist nation. They have their own set of laws. So they continue with that. Now, if Sri Lanka has to integrate its system, like telecom, your railways, the bigger nation already has everything. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Especially in infra, your roads and rail, your port management, your telecom, and your security. These 4 pillars, it costs huge amount of money. It really costs huge amount of money. This is a place where they should have integrated it already. You have your own culture, you run your own country, that's fine. There's 4 pillars of any nation, the security and the infra and critical strategic infrastructures. I think it makes sense for them to integrate with us. They have realized it late, they started doing it now.
Next question, please. Sachin Sharma wants to know, isn't China responsible for the agri mess in Lanka? They sent infected fertilizer to Lanka, not once but several times. And so they had to switch to organic farming instead of fertilizer-based farming.
See, Sharmaji, what happened is they stopped import of fertilizer, chemical fertilizers, which is basically urea and DAP. They said we want organic fertilizer. So that came from China. Whatever infection you see, that's an organic one. So China cannot be blamed for this. Definitely China cannot be blamed for this. The one and the only person or the family need to be blamed is the Rajapaksa's family because they decided to do it. The infected fertilizer is basically the organic one, not the fertilizer. It's not the other way. It's the organic one which was sent by China, had a lot of fungal and microbial issues, which kind of, it didn't help this thing. But this decision of going organic was purely the Lankan government's decision.
Next question, please. Harry IITM. I heard that some of our Indian intellectuals advise the Rajapaksas to go full organic. Now these intellectuals can write a thesis for failure. It's not a question. Let's go to the next question, please. What is that great leader Stalin doing? Brahaspatya.
See, Mr. M.K. Stalin is a chief minister of a state. This is something to do with national security and geopolitics. State does not have a direct role in terms of the national geopolitics or the national policies which government to government it happens. But what he has during his Delhi visit, what he has said is that we want to help the Lankan Tamil directly. Please give us permission to do so. Definitely, the union government, the central government will not be giving it because it's a nation-to-nation affair.
Mr. Lee wants to know, did the failed 1986 IPKF incident make ordinary Sri Lankans have a negative impression of India?
Yeah, I agree to this. There was a negative impression about India's interference, but that was more. The intervention was needed, but the intervention was done in a hurry. We should have had all the three parties, which is the Lankan government, the Indian government, and the LTT leadership, all in one page to make something of this sort happen. It's a peacekeeping mission. Basically, you disarm both sides. You disarm the rebels and give them assurance that the bigger force, the government, will not kill you or attack you. And you also tell the government to slow down and to get them inclusive into the democratic process, and you be the center stage to monitor it. It was a peacekeeping mission. It was never, we never went to fight there. In fact, the first lot of Indian army which went in was with very basic 303 rifles. But later, due to the political mess and the kind of thing which happened, we also need to understand it was done by then Prime Minister Sri Rajiv Gandhi. He was a new leader who just came into power, and he was also in a hurry to prove himself. He was a young leader coming from and he had to really match his mother's legacy. Who had won 1971 war and such as supposed to be a very, very strong leader. So that political compulsion actually made this kind of a thing into a mess, and eventually we paid the price. So it's like everybody lost it. Everybody lost it. The LTT also lost it. The Sri Lankan government also lost it. And in fact, we also had a reasonable loss in that operation.
Next question, please. Abhishek Singh wants to know, Kerala FM says Center to Stop Aggressive Globalization Policy as to learn from Sri Lanka. Your thoughts?
It is just the opposite of what he says. Globalization, and if we say we are globalizing it, what is this Atmanirbhar Bharat is all about? We are saying make here. And everything cannot be made here. Like an aircraft, it has got a lot of technical stuff. If you want to make everything in India, it is not possible. Even the F-35 has got sizable amount of 30-40% components coming from other countries. So the current government says that make in India, which basically means you drive employment and you reduce your imports so that you close in your trade deficit with two major nations. One is China and one is US. And you also make this an economic hub because we have a sizable. What is the biggest power of India is the human capital. We are young, working hours and working age is good. So we have a lot of population who can really pump in. This comes in, in a cycle. Once in 6 and 7 years it happens. So we need to capitalize it. So globalization, as Sri Lanka is not a bad example of globalization. In a way, Sri Lanka suffered. One point I failed to cover in this is the highest amount of public holdings. They were holding n number of PSUs. Look at Lankan Airlines or Air Lanka and compare it with Indian Airlines. Till last year, we were paying a loss of 35,000 crore. Who will pay the loss? The government has to pay the loss because government owns the Air India. Now we disinvested it. We gave it to a private operator who knows the subject, who is an expert, and they know how to do the business. Now, when Air India, if tomorrow goes on loss, it will be the company's P&L. It is not on the exchequer. But Sri Lanka never did it. Sri Lanka the government had everything on its own, right from a milk company to whatnot. Everything was run by the government. This is a classical example of the government running the private institutions, the government running the institutions like Soviet, and then eventually it falls. Because when the particular organization runs into loss, who will have to cover the loss? It's the government. How the government will cover the loss? It is by paying the tax money. It's diagonally opposite. I don't know what in what perspective I said. It's diagonally opposite.
Next question, please. Truth. What is the future of Pakistan and India relationship?
See, unless or until Pakistan establishment, both the army and the government come out of this mindset of anti-India, the hate on India, and the love on Kashmir. Their entire politics has been going on for quite some time now. In this, if they don't come out of this, India will have to see Pakistan as a nuisance. I would not call them enemy. They have to call it as a nuisance. We also need to see that they are nuclearly armed. Weak Pakistan is fine for us, but politically unstable Pakistan is not a good thing for us to celebrate. We need to have at least, whom will you talk with? You need to have a reasonable government or a thing to, even it may be a dictator. That's fine. So we will have, the relation will be in the current state, or it may further deteriorate if something like Mumbai 2611 happens. But it is not going to go further. It is not going to develop, or we may have free trade packs, or suddenly we become bye-bye. That's not going to happen until Pakistanis, the establishment comes out of this mindset, get the people out of this mindset of this two-nation theory, anti-India mindset, hate against Indians, and the love for Kashmir. If this doesn't solve, it's not going to take Pakistan-India relation anywhere.
I think that's it for now. Thank you so much, Major Madan Kumar. And viewers, stay tuned. We may have Major again shortly if some breaking events happen in Sri Lanka or in Pakistan. Thank you once again. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us. Almost an hour's time we have taken up of yours. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. Namaskar. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.